Dawn lifts like a gray curtain over the Rhine. Timbers sweat. Ropes creak. On the wharf at Mainz, a barge master thumbs a damp ledger, counting the day backward. 1 toll at the bend, 1 at the bridge, 1 at the city gate, 1 at the petty castle whose banner nobody outside the valley has heard of. Each stop shaved a coin. Each coin took a day. His cargo of cloth smells of river and patience. Above him, a horn sounds, a bright, short call, not a trumpet of war, a post horn. A courier leans from the saddle, leather bag tight to his ribs, eyes on the next station. Letters move faster than law, money moves slower than rumor, and somewhere between fog and bell, a question hangs heavier than the dew. What if this land of tolls and titles, of abbeys and dukes and cities with proud gates, became a true empire, not a boast, not a memory draped in Latin, a working machine, with receipts, with teeth, with roads that serve one map, courts that write one verdict, uniforms paid from one purse? What if the Holy Roman Empire stopped being a kaleidoscope of favors and became a state that could do the boring, stubborn things that make power real? Hold that wharf. Freeze the coins on the ledger line. Imagine a hand, not a divine hand, not a conquering hero, but a clerk's hand, drawing a narrow, simple rule across the page. 1 excise at the river, no more. Imagine the court seal that follows its judgment with constables and schedules, not prayers. Imagine a small guard drilling in the square, paid on time, loyal to the law rather than the surname. Imagine the post horn not as decoration on an inn sign, but as the pulse of a network that knows who owes what, who swore what, who moves where. Imagine the map simplifying, not by conquest, but by agreement that finally has a lock. Our story begins with wet wood and cold fingers, because that is how power is felt. At the toll house, at the weigh scale, in the time it takes a widow to learn if the judgment she won will be honored, or shelved, or mocked. In the time a captain waits for quotas that never arrive. In the time a peace is signed and then ignored because nobody has the budget to enforce it. Empires look like banners. Real power sounds like calendars, receipts, drums that count, letters that carry tasks, not just news. If you want more histories where the hinge is a receipt, a road, a rule, not a miracle, you belong with us. Subscribe to What If Wars. Now, back to the wharf. The post horn fades. The tollkeeper warms his hands. The barge master eyes the last empty line in his ledger and wonders which stamp will claim it. Tonight, we try to give him an answer, not a miracle, a mechanism, and if the mechanism works, an empire that finally deserves its name. Begin with the texture. The empire is not a palace. It is a field of banners. On one ridge, an abbey whose bells rule time. In a river valley, a free city with sharp laws and sharper merchants. Beyond that, a duchy with wolf hunts and iron chains that rise from the water like ribs. To the west, 3 archbishops anchor the Rhine's conscience. To the east, margraves watch old frontiers. The map is stitched by oaths, not walls. When a messenger rides, he carries words that expect to be answered, not commands that presume to be obeyed. An election makes the crown, not birth alone. The Golden Bull of 1356 set the ritual and named the electors. 7 voices ring in a hall, votes sit in public view. Consent ties the laurel to a brow. It's brilliant, it's fragile. Legitimacy grows from agreement and must be refreshed. Agreement can stall. A victor leaves the hall taller and lighter by concessions that paid for the blessing. Walk a market day in Frankfurt. Bakers shout the price of rye. Cloth bleeds color across stalls. In the crowd, stand envoys with careful sleeves, counting allies by nods. A candidacy is a coalition built in whispers and measured in exemptions, privileges, confirmations of old rights. Authority here is a ledger of give and take. Even victory binds. That is why power moves by invitation. When a Reichstag is called, imperial cities send delegates with notebooks. Princes send cousins with sharp ears. Bishops send lawyers who can recite yesterday's compromises. The hall listens. A speaker proposes a tax or a law. Heads angle. Quills scratch. Motions live or die not on threat, but on trust. On what each side believes the others will deliver when the candles gutter and everyone goes home. Persuasion, though, learn to imagine order. In 1495, Maximilian I's Reichsreform promised to make peace more than a wish. The Ewiger Landfriede, eternal peace, outlawed feud. The Reichskammergericht, the Imperial Chamber Court, raised its seal like a small sun. In that moment, private revenge looked old, law looked new, and still, the gap. A widow wins the case, she loses the enforcement. She goes home to a boundary that listens to hounds, not seals. The court can speak, it cannot walk. The eternal peace is a promise without a purse. The skeleton grows more bones. In 1500 and 1512, the Reichskreise, the imperial circles, carved the map into regions with presidents, assessors, quotas. A plan for defense, a plan for audit, a plan for roads. But circles on paper need teeth in a purse. Lists cannot split a raid. Minutes cannot lift a chain from a barge. Money is a promise you can hold. The Reichsmünzordnung, the coinage ordinances of 1551, revised in 1559, tries to make coins rhyme across towns. It sets weights and marks, finds clippers, tells mints what metal means. The idea is right, the bite is dull. One groat sings at Mainz, another groat, same stamp, lies heavy at Würzburg. Custom, says the alderman. The word outweighs the coin. War proves the accounting. The Reichsarmee is a levy system, contingents and coins promised by status and means. Some send proudly. Some send late, some send letters. Spring melts roads. Musters arrive in waves. A general's numbers tally on paper and lie in the field. Campaigns start at dusk, and the sun has already set. And yet, the miracle of friction. Trade flows despite chains. Universities thrive despite borders. Cities buy peace with contracts and hold it with walls. The culture of legality grows dense. People say right, liberty, immunity, privilege, with the weight a soldier gives to steel. The habit of writing down the world becomes a civic art. You can love this. You should. But love does not move carts. Admiration does not fill granaries. A flood lifts toll chains and resets every argument to zero. A hungry army does not read minutes. The empire needs a few simple things only a center can sustain. One purse that pays what it orders, one guard that appears when it speaks, one scale that balances the same in Mainz and in Ulm, not to erase differences, to carry them. Listen to the barge master. He will pay once. He is at war with paying always. Listen to the widow. She keeps her parchment wrapped in linen and calls it treasure. She knows it is a relic. Listen to the captain. He dreams of boots that fit the first time and a drum that doesn't sound like an apology. He wakes to lists. The pieces already exist. Circles that divide space. A court that divides justice from vendetta. Ordinances that divide honest coin from adulterated wares. A levy that divides defense into shares. A post that divides distance into days. A skeleton without muscle teaches anatomy. It doesn't move. Now the narrow door, no miracles. Only levers that were proposed, hinted, half-built, or already alive. Start at the waterline. One excise, uniform, small, stamped. At a toll house on the Rhine, a clerk lifts shutters on a new rule written in clear hand in German and Latin. He wears a badge with the double-headed eagle, and, beside it, a brass horn threaded with a narrow ribbon. He weighs, notes, stamps, and issues a chit, paid for passage, valid to the next imperial station. Downriver, a second clerk reads the chit, consults a ledger that matches the stamp, and raises the chain. No improvisation, no basket lowered with a smile and a private scale. At week's end, chits and coins ride in the same bag to a counting office in a city square. 3 keys open the chest, a prince's key, a city's key, a prelate's key. This is not a Habsburg purse. It belongs to the empire. The Thurn und Taxis post, built across the 16th century into a nervous system of horses, horns, and hard tables, already runs through these places. Let the post certify collectors. Let the ledger ride with the mail. Letters already beat winter on good days. Money can follow the same hoofbeats. With coin in the chest, the court grows legs. A writ leaves the Reichskammergericht and enters the bag like any letter. At a post station, a deputy breaks wax, copies the order, and dispatches it not to a chancy local bailiff, but to constables paid by the nearest circle. His Swabia, Franconia, the Rhenish circles, each keeps a modest roster of mounted men and sheriffs on salary, answerable to a president who reports quarterly to the Reichstag. Fines levied, sentences served, disputes cooled. When they ride to the widow's boundary, they lift the lord's chains, post the penalty on his gate, and leave a receipt that multiplies. The eternal peace stops being poetry. It becomes a schedule of consequences. Standardize where the road already runs. A pilot corridor, Rhine to Main to Danube, posts boards with common coin, common pound, common L. The ordinances of 1551 and 1559 are no longer a sermon. They are a counter. Clerks carry small identical scales stamped with the year and checked monthly. Customs within the corridor melt. Towns that lose takings receive compensation from the imperial chest, calculated in the open and reviewed each quarter. The corridor does not make everyone fast. It makes enough people predictable to change the math. Raise a small guard that belongs to all. 15 to 20,000 in peacetime. Companies distributed, always drilling. Jackets in black and gold. Imperial colors, not dynastic livery. Paybooks audited by the triple-key treasury. Command rotates by statute. Hohenzollern, Wittelsbach, Saxon, Habsburg, Palatine, drawn and calendared, not fought over. The guard is not theater. It is the hinge between paper and world. It steadies musters, backs constables, and arrives before excuses ripen. Seat adversaries at one purse. A bi-confessional federal council, Catholic and Protestant benches in parity, building on the Peace of Augsburg, 1555, and refusing to repeat its worst loopholes. War and tax require both benches. Veto exists, but the budget prices it. Grain, bridges, muskets, canals. The benches may glare across doctrine. They count across costs. Faith continues. Budgets tame fire. Close the extra doors. One foreign office under imperial seal handles treaties and trade privileges. Informed by city men and princely men together. Neighbors stop shopping for princes to break the price. Bind the corridors into water. Canal cuts where feasible. Locks where carpenters begged for them for decades. The Rhine-Main-Danube spine receives a handful of new hinge points where barges glide over dry summer and muddy spring. Not triumphal works, useful works. Now, watch the dominoes fall. A banker in Cologne closes his shutters and lowers risk by a sliver. That sliver buys a mast. A cloth factor in Mainz installs more frames. The post brings orders from Nuremberg before the dye dries. Promises keep time. Trust compounds faster than silver. Insurance writers, men who live by dread, quiet their quills. They still fear flood and fire. They fear confusion less. A ledger that once scattered sums now records an unbroken run from wharf to wharf. Claims fall where scales agree. Premiums dip. A barge owner retires debt early and buys a second hull. 2 apprentices become masters because predictability turns talent into plan. Workshops change rhythm. A dyer does one shade perfectly. A smith orders steel by weight that matches the last batch, not by a factor's grin. Misfits decline. Waste becomes margin. Margin buys skill. Journeymen carry stamped books and find benches abroad within a week. The corridor does not invent industry. It kills friction loud enough to hear. City gates stop yawning like courtrooms. They become hinges. Carts enter, carts leave, stamps ride with them. The coin sings the same note at dawn and dusk. Prices stabilize along the spine. A miller in Würzburg writes a figure and expects something near it in Regensburg. He is right often enough to call it normal. Normal is the quiet miracle. Musters answer the drum in weeks, not months. The guard arrives first and drills without swagger. It checks stores, opens the flour purchased last winter, posts patrols with circle constables who know the lanes by name. The levy trickles in and meets a corps that holds. Raids skim and fail. A failed raid teaches arithmetic. Supply, the old villain, gets a clerk's cure. The postmaster's books now track munitions, chits, and bread receipts. He knows which stations can spare horses, which towns owe wagons by ordinance, which forges set aside nails because the last invoice was paid on time. He becomes the quartermaster the empire never had without changing titles. War does not vanish. It changes shape, a conflict that would have spread like oil stalls at the wick. Writs travel with armed certainty. The council argues, then votes funds, because both benches remember the bread bill and the indemnity schedule. The guard takes the front until contingents arrive. Neighbors watch an empire that neither dissolves into diets nor lunges toward a crown. It behaves. Behavior deters. Abroad, one seal replaces many. An invoice speaks once, not thrice. He promises what the budget can sustain. He declines provocations he cannot afford. Would a particular prince like a different treaty? A neighbor asks with a smile. The envoy smiles back, as if they asked whether the Rhine flows uphill. One door denies back stairs. Fewer accidents become wars. Fewer rumors become treaties. Trade privileges follow clarity. A Mediterranean house anchors a bank in Augsburg because remittances no longer melt into tolls. A Dutch factor sends pilot shipments upriver under the stamp and discovers that loss to customs shrinkage is now a rounding error. Credit migrates inland in a trickle that will feel like a tide in 10 years. Hanseatic towns grumble, then pivot. They prefer bargaining with a center that counts and pays to haggling with 10 toll houses by candlelight. There are losers. Mint lords who shaved standards must compete in craft, not confusion. Guilds that guarded peculiar measures adjust to scales that match the corridor. Petty courts proud of capricious calendars see litigants bypass them for judgments that walk. These losses sting because they are losses of discretion. The empire buys them off when it must, and ignores them when noise lacks leverage. The guard's boots square at the market edge shorten some arguments before they begin. Culture changes as method. Letters arrive when they should. This is not poetry. Scholars send questions and receive answers inside a season. Pamphlets printed in Leipzig reach Strasbourg while the issue still breathes. A professor at Heidelberg writes for unified measures and sees the essay quoted in a circle's minutes 3 months later. Ideas act while warm. Students travel with stamped attestations. A goldsmith from Ulm shows a token embossed with the imperial stamp and finds a bench in Cologne by week's end. Journeys shrink without speed. A violin maker from Mittenwald ships pieces upriver that a man's court recognizes as the same length as pieces at home. Music becomes less local because wood and measure agree. Universities change tone. Bursars balance coins that bite the same from fair to fair. Presses share type and paper sizes because the post delivers specifications along with disputes. Cameral thinkers, men who love numbers as much as proverbs, count the empire to health. Timber quotas that spare shipyards, excise yields when stamps replace bribes, debt suits that end in payment when constables back the seal. Counting becomes fashion and then habit. Faith lives inside machinery. Benches glare, then cooperate because coin is impartial, and votes are counted in the open. Preachers still preach. Processions still process. A rumor of an incendiary sermon meets a budget line. Fund the school, repair the bridge, send 2 extra constables to stand near the square. Competence eats heat. Strength has borders, no map shows. Start with ground. Rivers braid and flood. Forests hoard mud. Mountains make messengers late even in June. A canal can cheat a ridge. It cannot erase an alpine winter. The corridor smooths a spine. Ribs still catch carts. Diversity is not only crests and costumes. It is weather, road, hoof time, then the tongues. Markets hum in dialects that disagree even when they wish to agree. Latin serves courts. Merchants trade French names for fabrics and Italian names for credit. A clerk in Cologne writes a measure like a clerk in Regensburg, only because the stamp taught their hands to rhyme. In the hills, habit speaks first. The guard can drill. It cannot teach a proverb to change. Standards run fastest on rivers. They slow in villages that are worlds. Interests wait the drag. Hanseatic pride leans hard. Those towns grew rich policing their own rules, convoys, and sea law. They respect a center that counts and pays. They resist a center that tells them how to weigh a bale they invented. Some accept compensation and stability. A few wait for a bad harvest to say old rights kept bread cheaper. The council answers with numbers or loses the argument. Princely caution bites deeper than greed. A duke fears irrelevance. A treasury that pays without his permission. A constable who knocks at his cousin's gate. A guard that drills in his market under a commander who reports elsewhere. Rotation helps. Triple keys help. The fear does not vanish. It moves from words to whispers. Whispers breed coalitions after dark. The center must learn the hardest art. Let a prince keep his portrait while losing his veto. Compare neighbors to measure the climb. England, across water, learns to tax windows and beer, to borrow on Parliament's faith, to pay a navy that arrives before trouble lands. France rides intendants through provinces, turns custom streams into one river called the Crown, a tile that bites, a bureaucracy that breeds, a standing army that lives in the budget like a resident ghost. The Dutch bind admiralties, provinces, companies into a single ledger. Their public debt becomes a web the world climbs. Sweden drills snow and iron into marching tables, a small kingdom with a long arm because tax rolls and conscription lists share ink. The empire, even reformed, will never be those. It will not conscript with ease. It will not speak with one tongue. It will not pour heart blood into ships. It cannot be a 19th century nation before the 19th century names that species. Its strength is the harness, a federal purse that feeds limited lawful force, circles that bite as local teeth on a central jaw, benches that count together, slower than a king's command, faster than an empty sermon, enough if the pace holds. Failure keeps doors ajar. If the excise grows greedy, towns break faith. If compensation runs late, customs sprout like weeds through cobbles. If the guard swells past purpose, commanders will reach for politics, and politics will reach back. If parity hardens into permanent veto, famine or invasion will teach benches to shout past each other. If the post spies and punishes thought instead of serving writs and receipts, the people who make the machine work will sugar the gears. Test it. A winter harvest fails. Prices climb. A circle president delays shipments to protect his own, citing a clause older than the corridor. Postal ledgers catch the trick. The council calls him in. He arrives with lawyers, priests, frightened bakers. Across the aisle, another bench lifts the guard's bread bill and offers to release stores if he resigns and pays fines. Pride resists. The guard stands within sight of the market and does not march. After 3 days and one ugly sermon, the president yields. The machine creaks. It does not crack. A border test. Light cavalry forage in a valley where the levy is young. In older years, stall and negotiation would feed those horses. This time, constables ride with a company of the guard under a circle writ. The raiders meet men who are ready because pay arrived in frost, not in flowers. The skirmish is brief. The envoy in the neighbor's capital receives the same week a letter from the Imperial Foreign Desk to reopen a neglected river toll treaty, if raids stop and millers receive damages. Carrot, ledger, stick. The neighbor files the lesson. A scandal. A hill-town postmaster enriches himself, stamping weights without checking them. Merchants complain. The postal inspector, new job, arrives by night, opens drawers with a second key, finds counterfeit seals. A report rides the corridor in a week. The council dismisses the man and levies restitution on the town that sheltered him. The guard stays in barracks. The punishment is accounting, not theater. The message moves faster than parades. Geography fights back. A flood reshapes a bend, turning a landing into marsh. The corridor reroutes by posting 2 carpenters and a surveyor with authority to shift a toll house 15 rods downstream. The count protests. His charter names, the Old Rock. The clerk opens the register and shows the new mark in the same hand that wrote the budget for the county school. The count grumbles and learns. This state edits the map and pays the invoice. Language resists in taverns before courts. A tanner jeers at a stamped coin because his father called that weight by another name. He loses a bet when the brewer shows the same stamp on a pint measure that pours the same pint in another city. Jeers fade when rent gets paid. Mediatization, later named and systematized in 1803. appears here as method, not conquest. Petty lordships that cannot keep roads, courts, or coins to corridor standard are invited, gently, expensively, to merge into a larger neighbor under imperial law. Banners hang in the new hall, archives are preserved, revenues are tallied into columns that feed the common chest. Pruning, not erasure. Slow, public, paid. Time is the last limit. Reforms depending on men tire when the men retire. The Guard needs rotation to stay professional without becoming a party. The Council needs yearly proofs that parity is bargain, not truce. The excise must remain small enough to feel fair and large enough to fund surprises. Circles must publish numbers apprentices can understand. The posts must remain boring on purpose. Boredom is strength. Excitement in such offices is a symptom. Could it still fail? Yes. A large war could tear benches apart. A prince with charm and grievances could rally the jealous, call the Guard a tyrant in embryo. A theology on a winter wind could outpace clerks. The difference now is not a guarantee. It is a buffer. The machine buys time for persuasion to work and buys force for persuasion to borrow. If both fail, collapse returns. If either holds, the patchwork becomes a pattern. Now, the payoff. In a hall lit by low winter sun, clerks stack the year's books on a table polished by elbows and argument. The benches face each other, silent. The treasurer turns a page and reads a single line without drama. 70. Not 70 florins, not 70 towns. 70 in 100 judgments of the Imperial Chamber Court enforced within one season of their seal. The number lands without applause. It settles like a plank in a floor. Men look up. A window opens. 70 means a case is no longer a rumor with parchment. 70 means a writ walks. 70 means the post horn's note carries weight as well as speed. Fines collected, goods restored, boundaries walked and marked under guard. The treasurer closes the book. The number hums in the wood. In a village we know, the widow's son lifts the parchment his mother folded in linen. The seal's color fades, the authority does not. He walks the boundary at dusk with 2 circle men, boots clean though the lane is dirty. They check posts, read the line aloud in 2 tongues, and mark where the huntsman strayed. One deputy nails a receipt to a gate, penalty paid, trespass ended. The widow's son plants a sapling where a post went missing years ago and knows it will not be rubbed out by hooves. On the river, the barge master runs his thumb down his ledger and sees empty space where excuses used to breed. One stamp at the wharf. One chain lifted at the landing. One nod at the next. He still pays. He pays once. A petty castle reaches for the basket. A post rider arrives with the week's packet and a folded order under a circle seal. The basket stays on its peg. The barge moves. The morning's plan survives the afternoon. On a muster field, the captain counts files that match paper. He writes fewer apologies. He receives fewer excuses. 2 guard companies hold the flanks. Townsmen fill the center. Pikes meet regulation. Flints throw sparks. He is not naive. The levy will arrive in waves, but the first wave breaks early enough to matter. A plan stops being a wish. The stray glory of 70 is not how it sounds. It is what it changes tomorrow. A judge writes a verdict knowing it will walk on legs he does not own. A merchant extends credit because a cheating scale will be knocked straight before the next fair. A miller sets a price for grain delivered in 6 weeks and sleeps through rain. A border raid considers the hour and turns away because a company that eats imperial bread will arrive before the bread cools. How did the number climb? Not by miracle, by a minor office that decided the whole. The post. The brass horn that once meant hurry now means hierarchy. Writs ride in the same bag as prices and prayers. At each station, a postmaster with 2 keys opens chests that hold money and orders, weighs seals against a pattern, logs times and names, dispatches deputies where benches once sent wishes, messenger, registrar, quiet policeman without a sword. The empire discovered the most dangerous gift you can give a letter, a task. It gave tasks to letters. Law learned to ride. The post did not act alone. It moved with the triple key chest that made refusal expensive. It moved with circles that grew teeth. It moved with a guard whose square of boots turned paper into space on a lane. But the post bound them. It timed them. It taught them to expect themselves. An order that lingers becomes rumor. An order that arrives, is logged, is followed, is checked, becomes habit. Habit is government. 70 becomes a story people tell with quiet pride. A baker in Bamberg says it to a cousin in Speyer, like naming a good harvest. A priest uses it to still a quarrel that would once have gone to fists. He tells two families the road to the court is short now, and shorter back. A bookseller in Augsburg inks the number on a broadside listing fines for false measures and sells out by noon to shopkeepers who frame it behind their counters as a charm against temptation and complaint. Numbers make enemies. A lord whose kennel used to cost him only grins now pays coin when hounds cross a boundary. He files a sullen appeal and loses in half the time appeals used to spend. A mint master who shaves standards opens a school to teach honest assaying because corridor scales do not care how long a family has weighed silver. A circle president who loved titles learns to live with audits on horseback. They grumble. They do not revolt. The penalties are too precise and too public. The guard's patience outlasts theater. The number travels as rumor with names attached. An envoy writes it in a stiff hand to his king. Judgments executed in 3 of 4 cases within a season. The king underlines twice and asks whether this is a boast or a trend. If they keep it through a flood and a drought, says the minister, call it a trend. The next year holds at 68 after a flood and 72 after a drought. Trend becomes expectation. Expectation becomes caution in foreign courts. A boy hears the horn on a road he knows. He looks up from a ditch where he lays a drain and doesn't hurry. He knows the sound the way a clock knows noon. He stands when the rider reins in, fetches the miller, hands over a receipt, watches the rider point north and vanish before the dust finishes one sentence. He returns to work with the comfort of a rhythm that cares enough to count. He will live under that note and never call it romantic. He will call it normal. That is the highest praise an institution can hope for. Lessons dry where the mud does. Power is not a roar. Power is a calendar that keeps its dates, a receipt that matches a stamp, a writ that finds a door before anger does, a salary that lands before spring. These are not ornaments. They are the skeleton of order. When the skeleton holds, colors look brighter. When it collapses, even banners look tired. Routes tame rivals. A corridor turns enemies into competitors and competitors into colleagues because the road pays them all. Standards do not erase identity. They let identities trade without bleeding to death at the gate. A uniform L does not make cloth dull. It makes craft ambitious. When the same coin sings the same note in 5 towns, a workshop hears permission to become a school. Rights require a witness. The chamber court spoke before it could walk. The promise was old, the purse was new. When constables ride with the writ and the post, clocks their miles. A right stops being a story told at a hearth and becomes a habit that survives a funeral. The widow's parchment ceased to be relic and became rule because someone paid to carry it. Small force is big law. The Guard never filled a continent. It filled the gap between good words and bad weather. It did not wear a dynasty's colors. It wore the statutes. 1,000 men in the right week can be stronger than 100,000 next year to bury regrets. Parity cools fire. 2 benches faced each other, counted together, and discovered that veto is a poor meal. Budget before belief did not cheapen faith. It made faith coexist with grain and bridges. When adversaries share a purse, rage gets priced. Priced rage is not love. It is survival. The minor office is not minor. The post bound everything because information without a task is gossip. Information with a task is government. A horn, a ledger, a second key. That was the hinge. The empire did not find a genius. It found a metronome. Once men learn to march to a time that does not lie, they reserve fury for things that deserve it. What changes beyond ledgers? A map does, but not as conquerors prefer. Borders still wiggle, colors alternate. The difference lies under the ink. The frame is federal on purpose. Cities keep their teeth, princes keep their portraits. The center keeps the purse, the schedule, and the right to knock. Neighbors learn to weigh opportunity against response time. Sudden wars get expensive. Petty tyrannies become boring. Boredom replaces fear where families live. This timeline ends without trumpets. It ends in routines that outlast tempers, a scale that balances in Mainz and Ulm, a canal lock that rises the week promised, a judgment that walks farther than gossip, a levy that starts on time enough to deter, not iron and blood, receipts and routes and rights. The choice was always there. The tools were old. The insistence was new. The price? A hum of clerks, the friction of audits, the bruise of fines, the pause when benches bargain before they bless. The trade is worth it. The alternative is brilliance that burns itself to ash and calls the ash experience. Better the slow glow of competence. Carry back a simple rule. Reforms are not spells. They are budgets attached to verbs. Justice is not eloquence. It is a document that arrives in time. Unity is not silence. It is a schedule everyone can hear. The fiercest engines of peace are small, a stamp, a scale, a drumbeat that measures men into the field before trouble learns to spell its name. Remember the barge master who paid once and moved, the widow who planted a sapling where dogs once ran, the captain who drilled instead of apologizing, the boy in the ditch who looked up at the horn and went back to work because the note meant the day would keep its promise. Their lives are the monument. Their impatience built the lamp that outshines slogans. We began with a ledger and a question. We end with a number and an answer. 70 and 100 judgments enforced within a season. Not perfection, proof. Proof that an empire can become true by choosing punctuality over pageantry, payment over posture, small offices over loud oaths. That choice does not conquer continents. It cultivates them. If you want more roads from foggy wharves to exact numbers, more histories that argue with the present, stay with us. Subscribe to What If Wars. Here, power is not myth, and the past is not a museum. It is a set of levers within reach, and we pull them until the map you know asks better questions. The horn sounds once more on the road. It is not urgent, it is on time.